you or someone you know is interested, please have them reach out to me or someone else on the board. You can go right onto our website and see who's who and get our contact information. That'd be great. Just good luck. So with that said, there's just a couple things that we're going to do before we get into our speaker. The first thing is there's 3 board member terms that are expiring, one being me, one being Leanne, and one being Roger Curley, who's not here. So at the annual meeting, I believe, is the only time that we get everyone to vote on this. We can go into it, we can do it individually. We can vote on the rules on this, so both individually or I will be selected. Thank you, John. Second, anyone? Michael? The slate of the board of directors for the members of the board for the next 3-year term will be Roger Curley, Leanne, and myself. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. I guess. The next thing is for the board members who are here, is there a motion to, I know everyone reviewed the meeting minutes in the house. Is there a motion to accept the rules? Second?
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. And we're going to have 2 brief reports. Matthew St. Alban is going to present the treasurer's report, and then John Spencer is going to give a brief report on reaccreditation and talk to us just briefly about what that involves. I think we as an organization are proud of the fact that we are accredited and are going through the reaccreditation process. Yeah, it's fairly fast. We've watched all. Matthew, I'm going to go first.
So, OCT is a very good financial health. With a strong checking account, a robust investment account, America is well positioned to invest in future conservation projects.
Back to our hand here.
Okay, thanks. So, it's saying OCT is reasonably good, financial health. We have good bank account and a strong investment. We have no staff, we're all volunteers, so we have very low costs. This allows us to operate a very small budget. For the full year in 2024, we collected $27,000 in contributions for our folks like you. Thank you very much. And then additionally, we earned $15,000 out of the interest and dividend investment. So it's a total of $22,000 in revenues 2024. And we spent just $24,000 this past year. Most of this is legal expenses to help us take care of and maintain properties that we own and ones we now easy and so on. Then the next highest expenditure accounting for our 990 and printing for the various mail. So therefore, in 2024, we have an operating fund balance of $18,000. And year to date, this year we've spent $15,000 and then have collected $21,000. So we're on point to have another high this year so far. I would note that the trust board meets monthly and they do a full financial report and review and approve the content. But if one has a question, to take some out or a meeting.
Yeah, no, great, thank you. Is there a motion to accept the treasurer's report?
I move to accept the treasurer's report.
Thank you, John. A second.
Second.
Let's go. All in favor? Good. Thanks, Matthew. John, Gene?
So I'm John Spencer, and with the Oceanside for 10 years. And back in 2015, we were accredited by the Land Trust Alliance, an organization based out of Washington, D.C., that supports about 300 land trusts across the country. And by being accredited, you are getting a little flag on the website that says you're accredited, which means that you are a very well-run, financially sound organization that does what a land trust is supposed to do. Coming up for reaccreditation every 5 years, we were reaccredited with a breeze back in 2020. And it's a land trust commission, reaccreditation commission, separate from Land Trust Alliance, separate staff, separate processes, and it is an incredibly rigorous review that you will provide for the records. I think back in 2020, we submitted well over 100 different documents to prove that we were well documented. So we're coming up for reaccreditation in 2025. This year, probably in October. And we have been accepted, the pre-registration filed, accepted. We are expecting them to come back to us with a hit list, I call it, of things they want to zero in on. And between 2020 and 2025, we did the most land transactions we've done in a long time. We doubled our land that's been protected, well over almost 130 acres now across the wide hybrids. And they're going to hit one of those, or two of them, three of them, those transactions, and delve down into what we didn't do right. I'm crediting them, right, because they go down to such detail for boundary with something. But last time we did it, it was fine. We didn't have any issues. The one that was interesting to me was we acquired the Bishop Ely property at Little Diamond, which all we should read out. That's a great American story. And it was thanks to the generosity of Little Diamond Hamlet, we were able to acquire that for buying or purchase. They did not like the fact that when we got that below market value, that we did not get an independent appraiser to give us an appraisal. So one of the things they said when we approved it was, next time we get a property, you go out and get an appraiser. And you do that if you buy a property as a block, acquire at least a buying purchase. So they go down to levels of detail that are surprising. As I say, well over 100. When we did it in 2015, it was 100% paper-based. You would see the paper was like basket. They completely converted that to all electronic now, which makes it much easier to understand what you want and try to do the best to do it. So, wish us luck. We're going to go and do our best.
Thank you, John. I do want to shout out to John because he and folks from Momentum, who are here aiding when you write of this, have helped work with John to pull this together, and it is a lot of work. So thank you. It's we'll see what we get, but I know that we've been successful the last two times, and I think I'm hoping that the request for additional information is going to be quite small the last two, but yeah, we know. Any questions on that? All right. Well, without further ado, I want to introduce Glenn Page. I'm very excited to have Glenn here. He is an amazing scientist. For the last 40 years, he's been working on coastal ocean and watershed issues and the interface of science, policy, and practice, which is really cool because a lot of times most scientists just work with science, most policymakers just work with policy, and practitioners just keep to their own thing. And the blending of those is where the action really occurs, and that's what Glenn has been working. He has a restoration ecologist by training. His research and practices will focus on understanding the complex social and ecological systems and how to enable broader engagement in the process of large-scale ecological change. So he takes this information and basically looks at it and figures out, all right, where are the problems and how are we going to affect change? They're working with all the people that we have to, that includes scientists, fishermen, policymakers, the communities where we all live. That's really at the cutting edge. So I'm interested to hear his presentation today. He's going to be talking about eelgrass. Louder. All rise. And so the eelgrass minerals that are in Casco Bay and up and down the East Coast are some of the most important part of our marine ecosystems. And Glenn's going to talk to us about the changes that have been occurring over time with these eelgrass systems and what's being done to encourage their so keeping that sustainable as well as helping them expand. Without further ado.
Yeah, thank you, thank you, thank you. Well, it's an honor to be here. And just on the point of Land Trust Alliance and what you're doing, land trust movement is critical. It's been around for about 30, 40 years. And just last year, we actually facilitated the retreat for the Lincoln Institute for Land Policy. And those were the guys that actually helped start the Land Trust Alliance back in 1981. So I just cannot say how important what you're doing is. And it's an incredible honor to be here to share with you some stories, really. It's some stories of hope. It's some stories of possibility. It's some stories of dramatic change. And at the end of the day, it's a story of really of us. What are we going to do? What's our response to this incredible challenge? So we are going to use I would consider it a superhero of the marine ecosystem, the seagrass meadows. We'll talk about that. But I represent a group called Cobalt, the Collaborative for Bioregional Action Learning and Transformation. And basically what that means is, how do we come together? Indigenous, Western, Eastern, not just human, more than human, connecting with ancestors, connecting with the yet unborn. It's really a wild opportunity to think about what's possible, and we're expanding our own imagination. But if you want any more of the details of the research regarding the seagrass work, we have a story map that we've created, a simple QR code. I can send that out and make sure it gets distributed to everyone. So a lot of this information will be shared. Thank you all. So let's begin with poetry. This is really all you really need to know. After this 1 minute, basically the job's done because it's just so brilliant. Instructions for living a life. Pay attention. Be astonished. Tell about it. Does anyone know who this is? Who wrote this? The late, great Mary Oliver. Absolutely extraordinary poet. And there it is. That's the entire essence of this talk. So we're going to basically have 3 parts to this talk. The first part is pay attention. The second is be astonished. And the third is tell about it. So we'll channel a little bit of Mary Oliver. So let's begin with the pay attention. So it's pretty astounding what we're learning, and we're still learning how dramatic the change is unfolding around the world. This is our one blue planet, and you can just see by these different indicators, systems are changing. Some increasing, things like carbon dioxide concentration, some things decreasing, like base flows of streams. Some things are going up and down depending upon where you are. So context really matters. It really is important to understand and pay attention to where you are at any given point. We do a lot of work with coastal communities around the world. This is, in many cases, what might be called the crucible of change. This is where the vast majority of people live, within 50 to 100 miles of the coast. It's also where nature's, what might be called goods and services, are the highest. Issues of fisheries, issues of things like mangroves and salt marshes and coastal forests and river systems. Amazing productivity, as you well know, working on a land trust. This is also where massive development is occurring. So we've been working in places such as Sub-Saharan Africa and Central America, in Baja Peninsula, out in the Pacific Islands, Hawaii and other areas in the Pacific Islands, as well as areas in the Chesapeake, in Florida and the Keys, in Iceland most recently, and then doing a lot of work in Scotland, Wales, and Ireland, and also in Colombia. So our work is global in scale. It's global in that it's helping communities learn about the systems they're in. And it's not about some expert coming in and saying, oh, this is what your system is. It's learning together. It's learning from the experts in the place. And so this is what I'm so excited about this talk today, because so much about eelgrass restoration and protection is not about some external expert coming in. It's about listening and engaging and working with you who know this system better than anyone. So it's how do we do that? How do we make that step forward? But a key area is right here, the Gulf of Maine, one of the most rapidly warming systems anywhere on the planet. The only other system that's warming faster is the Arctic. So, Casco Bay. Here we are, sort of the epicenter of Casco Bay. This just shows some of the eelgrass extent in 2018. We've lost about half. And that was in 2022 that indication that those results were told. And we were already building a team before that report came out. So we were already building this sense of awareness of, maybe this is important. And indeed it is, in terms of both the ecological significance of seagrass and the importance of community engagement. So, just as a little bit of background, there's 63 different species of seagrasses, and these are plants that live entirely underwater in seawater that are distributed around the world. Eelgrass is the one that basically is in the northern hemisphere, the dominant system. It also has enormous value. Fisheries, water quality, shoreline erosion protection. Unbelievably beautiful. And it happens to sequester carbon about 20 to 30 times out of a rainforest. Now, as that system starts to sort of lose its health, it ends up emitting carbon. So it's really important that we pay attention to where these places are that have eelgrass and what can we do to actually address and ideally bring them back. So right when we first launched, it just so happens literally that same day, the journal Science had a whole issue dedicated to grasses. And indeed, there was a lovely article of the planetary role of seagrass conservation, an amazing article. And it talks about how important it is for communities to engage in this process. But the irony about this is that seagrasses are actually a misnomer. These are not grasses. For those of you who have done any sort of botany, you'd appreciate this. These are actually flowering plants. These are what's referred to in the botanical language as angiosperms. Well, grasses are not. So it's sort of funny that Science, the journal Science, sort of got it wrong, but they were giving a whole lot of love because of the common name, seagrass. It fit in, so we're okay. But it's really important that this article came out right when we were launching our sort of local effort. But what this shows is basically a really good, healthy system contains and can really do a lot of efficient carbon burial. As the system becomes challenged health-wise, it begins to release carbon. So it's not just, the ecosystem is great no matter what condition. No, we really need to actually understand how it's doing. And it's also hard because it's basically hidden from public view. So it's sort of this forgotten superhero in our lives. It's sort of like the greatest aunt that you've had that would just give you all this stuff, love, and just sort of endless bounty, and nobody really ever knew about her. Well, that's sort of the seagrass ecosystem that we're dealing with. And this was in the Science article. And basically what this shows is business as usual. We're going to basically lose seagrass meadows around the world. Now, coral reefs are similar in terms of their power and benefit. They're more in the tropical systems. So these seagrasses are more in the temperate systems, but there actually are some really good indications that we can bring this back, come back to a net positive or a net gain. We can do it. It's not going to be easy, and it's incredibly time intensive. And as John did such a lovely job with the introduction, I have spent a lot of my time working with a whole lot of people doing habitat restoration. So things like restoring a salt marsh. I sort of equate it to like checkers. Restoring seagrass meadows is like 3D chess on a mountaintop in a rainstorm at night. It's really, really hard, but we can do it. And so that's really what this is all about. These little systems, these little sort of beautiful, adorable systems are just loaded with value. Now's a good time to actually go swimming. And of course, you all know that you have meadows right off of Long Island. But there, if you just go down and take a look, there's little bubbles of oxygen coming out right now. And that's bringing the oxygenation of the water column. So we've spent some years doing some really good underwater work. We do all sorts of quantification of understanding the health of these different meadows and understanding what might be some of the issues, but there's no smoking gun. It's not like, oh yeah, it's green crabs. That's it. Or, oh, it's coastal development. That's it. Or nutrient enrichment, too much nitrogen, failing septic. No, it's not just that. It's all those things. It's this incredible confluence of issues. So as we begin to think about this, it actually helps us think about the different systems that we're living within and how we live. And so this is, in many ways, that canary in the coal mine. It's going to help us. If we pay a lot of attention to this ecosystem, it's going to help us make decisions, ideally, that will help so many other aspects. So we do a lot of data collection. We do a lot of storytelling as well. And we're called Team Zostra, and I'll just show you some of the images of the people on the team that are here. We do a lot of work with artists and indigenous ways of knowing. And this is Dwayne Tomar. I'll mention him and the Passamaquoddy tribe and the work that we're doing by also translating a lot of the language. You're probably well aware that, oh yeah, we use a lot of Latin in our science. And so Latin and English, well, we're actually adding a third language of Passamaquoddy Maliseet into how we talk about these ecosystems. We also have a really good governance board. We have a dive control board and a board of directors. So all that you just did with the Roberts rules and the approval and the, oh my gosh. We are a 501c3 nonprofit here in Maine, and also an all-volunteer organization. So we definitely appreciate the governance. We also lead a dive team. We lead a scientific dive team. And there are other dive teams like Stantec and others around. What we're doing is a scientific diving operation following the American Academy of Underwater Science. And you'd think, okay, well, there's probably a lot of universities doing that. Well, there's fewer and fewer and fewer. There's University of Maine in Orono, Maine Maritime Academy. Then you have to go all the way down to UNH. There's no scientific diving going on at academic institutions between Orono and Durham, New Hampshire. So we've decided, well, let's do that. We need to do, if we're going to be underwater, to do this safely, let's launch a scientific diving program. And so we've done that. We have absolutely amazing team of folks. And we follow this AAUS, this American Academy of Underwater Science, depth rating. We, just in the past 2 years, almost 130 dives, 82 hours. And this is because, as you well know, we have incredible currents, we have incredible tides. And to do this work safely, we need to actually follow really good safety protocols. We do a lot of collaboration with institutions such as Bowdoin, and I'll mention them quite a bit because their Schiller Coastal Studies Center have been a fantastic partner in all of this. And we have one of our own, where is Christian Laontaine. You're going to hear from him in just a moment, but he literally grew up on Long Island, and this is a lovely picture of him and his wife and their brand new baby, Eleanor, who, how old? 7 weeks. Woohoo! So one of the things, you're the first organization to hear this, not just about Eleanor, but what we're going to do is likely name one of the seagrass meadows in Eleanor's honor. So this is really important, and we're unaware that anyone's ever done naming of seagrass meadows, and we're going to be working with our indigenous partners as well to have indigenous names. Obviously, that's an issue for land and land back movement, but with seagrass meadows, it sort of gives us an opportunity to actually get good at this, to think about what it means to do naming. So we're going to use Eleanor and that incredible, beautiful baby smiling face. But it's been wonderful. Christian has been working with us. He's now a Cobalt Fellow. And so you'll be hearing from him about how he's been using his drone photography, how we're paying attention to these seagrass meadows. So that was the pay attention. Now we're going to move on to Act 2. The be astonished. So, these meadows are extraordinary. They're some of the most beautiful in all of the East Coast. Casco Bay, because of its, somewhere between 350 to 370 islands, depending upon tide, right? The calendar islands, has some of the most seagrass habitat in all of Gulf of Maine. So there is no better place to do this than right here. And it's because of the islands. It's because of the archipelagos. It's because of the shallow water habitat that falls off on some of these islands. And so this used to be just this absolute bounty, and it still is in some areas. But we've lost so much. In some of these meadows, the blades of the seagrass go as high as 3 meters or 10 feet. Now, when I talk to other folks, other seagrass researchers, they're like, really? Oh yeah, you should come up. And I think we're in this, we've not yet documented this fully, but I think we're in an interesting, almost like a maximum, where as you go south, it gets warmer and it gets limited. As you go north, it gets colder and limited. I think there's something about right in this area that has some potential for some of the most stunning tall meadows. But right off of this island, there's absolutely extraordinary seagrass meadows. So I mentioned this is a flowering plant. And in terms of the be astonished, this does indeed blow my mind. So I won't go deep into the genetics, but this plant is around 30 to 40 million years old, the sort of genetic history, and it actually evolved out of the sea onto land, and it said, this is fine, but no, I like it back in there. It literally came back. So if those of you who might know duckweed, which grows in ponds, that's a relative of Zostra, as it basically evolved on the land and said, I'm fine. I'm going back in the water. So the genome itself, and when the genomics was started, Zostra marina was which is the Latin name for the plant, Zostra marina. When genetics, when we sort of figured out how to do genomic work, That was the first plant that was selected because of its outsized ecosystem value. And so we know a lot about its genetics, and we know how to apply that information, but we know very little about different genetic families here in Casco Bay because we're just beginning to scratch the surface on the application of that knowledge. So that's part of into the future. But now I'm going to just take you through the stages of development, because at the very beginning, there's both male and female parts that live together on a blade of, again, what's called grass. It's not grass, it's a flowering plant. And it matures in late July to mid-late August. So right around now, these meadows are loaded with seeds. In fact, in just a minute, Hazel is going to assist with some handing out of these seeds, because I think I have some for everyone, but I want you to hold this in your hand and feel it, because it's absolutely extraordinary. And Hazel is amazing. She's a rising junior at Bowdoin College and another member of the local family here on Long Island. So thank you, Hazel. And so these are called spathes, S-P-A-T-H-E. And this is where the seeds form. So, and this beautiful art was done with a student from Bowdoin, an art student who was doing an independent study with us. So let's unpack this a little bit. So this is what the reproductive shoots look like underwater. So if you were to go out and take a swim over in College Rocks, and you would literally see these blades everywhere that are loaded with seeds. You can see that's the spathe. So when we're handing this around, that's sort of where that spathe came from. So it begins about 30 days ago. So the spathe that you're holding in your hand began about 30 days ago in its development. And both male and female parts looks like this beautiful braid. And then the female, the style, appears and seeking pollen. And so you can see a picture of that beautiful braid, and you can see these styles just beginning to emerge. And what they're doing is they're looking for pollen. And there's a side view of the styles. Then, as they are pollinated, then the male anther releases pollen. And so, as to not self-pollinate itself. So it has this sort of male and female action going on in the same plant. And then as that female style is pollinated, it bends back, and the ovary begins to swell. And you can see the ovary swelling into these gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous seeds. And that's what you have in your hand. Does everyone have one? So these are yours to keep. But what's really interesting about this is what you're holding is potential. It's like any new seed, right? You know, you all have seeds in gardens and things. But this potential has so much more for what we can do collectively to engage in coastal ecosystem restoration. It's really held in these seeds. And so as we begin to think about, well, how do we do this? How do we begin to think about trying to restore these meadows? It begins by understanding the basic biology. And when you see an image like that, which is a seagrass seed under a microscope, think, my gosh, look at that beauty. So this is inspiration for artists, for poets, philosophers. So there's a lot of incredible uses in addition to this, but it's this story of how it matures and how it actually forms the seed and how we understand that. Because no one, until Cobalt came along, no one had actually figured out when it went to seed here in Casco Bay. So we just started doing that 3 years ago. This is our 3rd year. And we've actually now confirmed that it is this sort of late July to early August, but that's only in 2 places, East End Beach and Mackworth Island. We really don't have a sense. We've been checking in a little bit here, but that's a question, and that's a question we'll be exploring. So as that report came out a few years ago of the 2022, this is the Maine Department of Environmental Protection. They do a really remarkable job of assessing how much seagrass there is in the state of Maine. And because they basically divide the state of Maine into 5 chunks, they're constantly moving to another area, and then by the time they get back to Casco Bay, that's 5 years later. So their attunement, they're taking stock of how well the meadows are doing is on a 5-year cycle. So it was 2018 to 2022 that we saw this dramatic loss. So, what do? Do we just sit on our hands for the next 5 years and just wait and see what happens? No. And that's what we're doing. We're responding to that gap of knowledge, and this urgent opportunity to actually do something. This is where also with the land trust movement and the work that you guys are doing is so important, because land protection and ecosystem restoration, particularly offshore in the marine, really need to go hand in hand. And there's so much we can do and learn from the work together. So last year, as we were beginning to further understand, okay, how are the meadows doing, not just every 5 years, but every year, we went around to the different areas, some that were dense back in 2022, some that were sort of patchy, and some that were actually that there were none there at all. And so we went around to these different areas, and we found a really interesting story that a lot of the inner bay islands, that's significantly where a lot of losses were, but not entirely. McQuoit Bay almost entirely gone, but not all. And areas like Mackworth, which I'll show you in just a moment. So this shows you a really good image of the seagrass meadow. This was all seagrass back in 2018. All that. So that's the Seal Rock right there. There's Mackworth. There's the Causeway. So there, that shows in 2022 the meadow that was identified. That is entirely gone. The only area that still remains is that small little patch identified by that smaller red area. There's some areas over on this side that are doing really, really well. So this shows you this purple. The deep purple is in the 2022 survey, where the deepest purple is where there were the best, healthiest meadows. So we went to these 4 areas, nothing. We found no evidence at all. Some, it was patchy. None, fantastic. So it's not a simple story. It's not a simple just, oh, this whole area has been lost. This whole area is holding on. This is now Little Shebig. This is that sandspit between Little Shebig. Fantastic. Doing really well. And it's nowhere near the height of Long Island. The height there is probably about maybe 2 to 3 feet tall. A lot of sand dollars over there. But that meadow is holding on. Here's Long Island. Amazing, amazing, fantastic, stunning. So whatever you're doing it well. Yes?
Are you just doing this by drone or by pictures? Are you doing portrait sampling?
Great question. Yes, yes, and yes. So we're doing all those different aspects, but some of the simplest ways of going into the site is literally just jumping in and with mask and snorkel, and then oftentimes we'll put on our dive gear, depending upon the height.
When can you tell the difference between rare or patchy or seasonal?
Yes, we can begin to get a sense, and then what we'll do is we'll come back.
Multiple times?
That's right.
Same site?
Yes, that's right. And that's why the importance of having drone photography is so good. So you're absolutely right, including the use of satellites. We can even use satellite information. A key...
You're using that as quantitative data?
Yep.
So over time, you're looking at this. Can you distinguish between the patchy and the rare?
Yep, that's what we're doing. That's exactly, we're taking the steps towards doing that and trying to do that well. And doing that in between the time that DEP flies these areas. And the way they do it is they have fixed wing aircraft that they follow a flight line, and they have to get just the right tide height, just the right weather quality. And then they send divers into the field, but not all, in all the places for confirmation. So we're trying to get good at doing that, but extremely low cost. But excellent question. So some other amazing meadows. This is off of Haskell Island, and this is Fort Gorges. So this is Haskell. That's an absolutely spectacular meadow off of Fort Gorges. A lot of these have really suffered quite a bit. So those 450 and 453 have shrunk in size, but 452 is really holding on and possibly even expanding. So it's not a simple story. And so we take a lot of data, and this is what it's like as we go out and identify when the seeds are maturing. Can we collect them, and can we process them, and can we then use them for restoration? So this has been a giant question mark. There has been some successes in Chesapeake, some success in Wales and the UK, some success in Sweden, but also a lot of failures. And I don't know about you, but it's really easy to talk about successes. It's really hard to write up and to tell story of failure. So a lot of the failures have not really been well documented. So this is really hard work, and it's important that we understand what doesn't work as well as what does work. So this gives you a sense of our divers going down and doing some collecting. So you can see the reproductive shoots, and what she is doing is simply plucking a reproductive shoot and putting it into a bag. And there you go. We do that thousands and thousands of times. So this is a shot of right off of Long Island. This is East End. As you can see the beautiful meadow. That's, again, another reproductive shoot. And that's what we do is we pluck those spades. So what you're holding is we pluck them off of the reproductive shoot. And that's what it looks like in aggregate. And we continue to do that over and over and over again. In fact, if anyone would like to join us, we're going to be out at the Bowdoin Schiller Coastal Studies Center this weekend plucking spades. So it might not sound like fun, but no, we really actually turn it into a really good time. But working with Bowdoin, they have a flow-through seawater lab. And they can do all sorts of amazing work with it, a lot of good engineering and sort of plumbing and water quality work, sand filters, UV light, which really helps us to process these seeds. And so this shows you the coolers that we've set up and some of the filtration systems. We have a detailed protocol for how to do it. And there's the spades sitting at Schiller Coastal Studies Center. They basically take about 3 to 4 weeks to what's called dehiss, or the seeds to mature and to fall out of the spade. And then we do all sorts of tests. We see how viable they are. We do a crush test. We do like a dye. And we simply see if they will sink or float. The ones that sink, those are healthy. The ones that float, nope. So we're getting good at the processing. And then we do the counting. And we've actually used a volumetric measure, the old 10 milliliter graduated cylinder. It's sort of like the jelly bean jar. Guess how many, just take a wild guess, how many seeds are in the 10 milliliter graduated cylinder? Who said 1,000 first? Bam, well done. Exactly, 1,000. 1,000 seeds per 10 milliliters. So it makes it really easy. So we're not like 1, 2, 3. So this is how we do it. And these stunning, absolutely beautiful images of these seeds. And this is what it looks like when it germinates. And talk about potential. I mean, this is full of hope, really. And so what we've done is we've begun to do some pilot demonstration of restoration. So this last year, and we're doing this in partnership with some groups, the Friends of Casco Bay, which they do some really great long-term water quality monitoring. The Casco Bay Estuary Partnership, which that's funded through EPA. Let's hope that keeps going. And as well a group called Manomet. They largely do bird conservation, but here they've got a fisheries program here that's based out of Brunswick. And they do a lot of the green crab work. We work with EPA Region 1 and a whole lot of folks at different academic institutions. And groups like Stantec, who are doing things like the dredging over at the municipal pier at East End Beach and coordinating timing. So when we know right before the dredging impacts the seagrass meadows, we can go in and remove the material. So what we did here is we designed a test restoration to sort of see if we could do it. So these are 4 by 4 meter squares with replicates, and we've tried 2 different approaches, just simply hand casting the seed, and another approach, putting them in a tea bag, a biodegradable tea bag with a little bit of sediment. And the sediment is really important because of the microbial community in the sediment. When you think that there's something really important there, we're just beginning to scratch the surface of our understanding of the relationship of the seeds to the microbiome in the sediment. And of course, the gear to mark the sides. And there we are on a cold October 13th. This is just this past October, putting the seeds in. We were doing, of course, the measuring. There's the tea bags. And using soaked bamboo skewers to skewer in the tea bags. All of that is biodegradable. And you can see the water quality, the turbidity was not ideal. There's the hand cast. And then we waited and waited and waited and waited. And we literally went out January, February, March, April. I mean, it really was. It was right around Easter, and it really felt like the resurrection. It was incredible. I mean, that looks super tiny. Oh my Lord, were we happy. And it seems sort of small. You're like, well, how can that be such a big deal? Well, of course, as we went around, we saw more and more and more. It's like, wow, it worked. And we really we still in many ways are eyes closed, feeling in the dark for exactly how to do this. But we're not alone. This is how others in other parts of the world, in fact, we are literally going to Wales to meet with Project Seagrass to do a knowledge exchange later on in September. Because it's really important we just share what worked, and again, what didn't. What was the, what failed? Yes?
There was this product, which were they, hand casted or tea bag?
Excellent question. They were both. So what we're basically coming to the conclusion in this relatively small test is that the hand cast worked a little bit better. That we actually thought that the tea bags might be better because of the protect against the predation of the green crabs. Didn't seem to affect it as much as we thought. And yes, green crabs do eat, this is documented in Sweden, green crabs do eat the seeds. And then doing excluder cages is really problematic, because if you want these plants to grow, you really have to not do anything that affects light.
How are you sure that the seeds that germinated weren't natural?
Because we actually we did a control, so there was a total of 9. 3 of those we did nothing. And if it was a natural recolonization, that there would be some signal in those controls. There was nothing. Secondly, we found a site that was near, but not so near, that there would likely be seed dispersal from adjacent beds. So we tried to work on that, but some of the things that we're learning is it's a numbers game. That as we do this, we have got to just figure out ways to get more and more and more seeds into these target restoration sites. So that's where this comes in. So May 19th, plants were growing bigger and really, really astounding, and I have all sorts of information. Well, now it comes to Act 3 of this little play of life, and it's the challenge to tell about it. And that's the story. So it's telling about this possibility. I mean, you're holding it in your hand, this potential. How do we tell about it? How do we, it's not as if we figured it out. It's not as if we have all the answers, but we know we have some ways forward. So let's begin with some of the telling about it from Christian Laontaine, who was doing some really good work with the drone photography and as a new Cobalt fellow. And you'll hear his story of being involved in this. Welcome, Christian.
Welcome. I'm going to stand if that's all right with everyone. My name is Christian Laontaine. For those of you who don't know me, I grew up here on Long Island. I just want to say thanks, Glenn. It's been a pleasure to work with you these past few months, getting to know you. It's one of those things where you wouldn't think there would be someone who's so interested in eelgrass, but you certainly are, and it's a wonderful thing, and I've come to really appreciate the beauty of eelgrass and really the whole project. I also like to say that I'm not a scientist. I'm a commercial fisherman. I was up this morning at 4 a.m. Well, 300 trouts before coming here. But I do have an interest, many interests, and one in particular is drone photography. And getting connected with Glenn, I really thought that there was some good that I could do, and I thought I could add value to this project. So just quickly, I just want to show people what the drone looks like. I'm not going to fly it, but it's pretty small, and this allows us to actually, in real time, take photos of these eelgrass meadows, and essentially through a process, it's kind of complicated, photogrammetry, and you create a mosaic, you stitch them together like a quilt, and you're able to create your own almost satellite imagery just by compiling hundreds, or in some cases for these meadows, thousands of images, and it creates a beautiful high-resolution map of what the ocean looks like. But if you take a low water day or at low tide with clear visibility, a lot of times you can see the eelgrass meadows and the extent of the meadows perfectly. Do I have slides here, Glenn, if I proceed? I'm assuming. Yeah, of course. Perfect. Excellent. Thanks. Great. This is this is a photo of Harvard and Grace, and you can really see just how you can see just all of what is on the bottom, and then I'll get more into that. But it's really cool. This is, again, we're talking about the current extent of eelgrass meadows on Long Island. And the good news is that we have pretty good eelgrass, but we wanted to get the in-depth look at what it looks like in 2025, because again, this is 2022, and we're not expecting any updates until 2027 through the main DEP. So this is what is available on Google Maps. And in terms of being able to see the eelgrass, it's not very good. As you can see, when they did the satellite, they clearly chose a windy day. They were not thinking of what we would want for eelgrass doing. So you really can't see much at all. But if we go to what the DEP collects, you can actually see quite a bit. So this is the 2022 imagery that they actually use to tell us how much eelgrass we have. And you can see there's some nice patchiness in through here. There's good eelgrass all around. This is on the east end of Long Island, that's Crow Island, Cleveland, down here on the bottom left. So this is really quite good, but we can do better. So when you use the drone, you take thousands of images and we stitch them all together, and it's a long process. But when you do it, it gives you, it doesn't necessarily look the prettiest, but what it reveals is really compelling. So when you do it, you can actually see quite a bit more detail in these things. I'll zoom in just a moment, see if you can see what we're talking about. So this is off of Please Landing. This is some of the available imagery that is given to us. And I'm just going to click forward to what it looks like after using drone techniques. And you can see how resolute it is. And what we're able to do is actually quantify how large of an area. Here's the eelgrass. It's actually such a low tide that a lot of the eelgrass is exposed. And we chose that because it would show well. what we're able to do is we're actually able to use GIS tools to figure out the area, the square footage or acreage of that, and we're able to figure out the density of these meadows. So in terms of what the DEP gives us is incredibly valuable, but we can see it at a much more at a much granular scale using the drone imagery techniques. So this is off of the east end. You can see, or what would be just to the north of that is the hulks of the two ships at the in between at the Joey Dyer Straits, as it's now called locally. But you can see here, this is the stitching. You can see some of the fragments or artifacts of the process. What we can see is beautifully dense eelgrass meadows mixed with kelp here and more eelgrass meadow. And what you can do is you actually can quantify and classify that you train the model to identify what is high likelihood eelgrass and what is high likelihood kelp and what is high likelihood nothing. So from this, we're able to get exact, or pretty close to exact figures on area and density. By the numbers, really quick, Glenn mostly said this, that, Casco Bay, we're down 50% since 2018. But importantly, Long Island's only down 21%. So really, in the face, compared to the rest of the bay, Long Island has been quite resilient in our eelgrass meadows, which presents a really exciting opportunity as we look forward to the future, with the potential for, in general, maybe it's donor meadows, or maybe it's just learning why Long Island has been successful or why it's resilient. I'm not suggesting that we're doing anything in particular that is making them stay here. It might just be chance, but nonetheless, it's important to learn why. And then this is my choice pick of where we would name meadow after my daughter. It's very exciting. And we're making news here, but first name seagrass meadow in all of Casco Bay. But we have an incredibly dense meadow off of the west end at College Rock, Front Beach. The meadow really extends all the way up to Moss's Landing. And then the east end, I previously showed, that's incredibly dense. And it's just really kind of unique for the bay to have such large and dense meadows that haven't really seen as much change as some of the inner bay areas. But I think that's pretty much where it'd be. I think really the important takeaway is, how can Long Islanders or people who are interested in stewardship be part of the process? Because I think there's just so much potential for even, people like me who don't really know much about eelgrass, or I didn't know much about eelgrass, but I had a certain skill where I thought, well, jeepers, I can identify, I can image these things and really help out to figure out the extent. There's really an incredible opportunity for everyone to get involved and continue to be stewards of these meadows and to kind of choose and forge how we want the future to look like, whether, it's eelgrass restoration, whether it's, using some of our great fertile grounds here as donor sites. But yeah, that's just amazing. That's pretty much it.
Smaller along the coast of other islands in the bay.
Yeah, it's funny. It's one of those things where I find that most people have a really good understanding of where the meadows are. I went swimming on that beach when I was a kid. I remember there was a meadow there. Now there isn't. Or I actually don't remember there being a meadow there, but I just went down there last week and I was in the water and I saw it. The local knowledge is crucial, and it's wonderful to learn people from the bay because we know where they are. The good news is, generally speaking, the imagery that the state gives us is good enough to mostly know where the meadows are, but we're always interested in knowing, because sometimes they're smaller, and sometimes it looks like it could be kelp, but it's actually bluegrass that's really long and stuff like that is really valuable.
I put in a public plug for Pete's Island.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
There's a meadow just south of the PEIA center. In case you didn't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very good job.
Amazing.
Yeah,
And so I'm going to give you a little bit more of exactly this story of how we can look at all the islands and begin to think about what could be a strategy. And it's, yes, while we're interested in who might be willing to be part of this, but we're also willing to see if we can come together and potentially with groups like the Land Alliance, Land Trust Alliance, with OCT, is that, yeah, Ocean Team, to potentially go after some grant funding and have some funded work that potentially could be together. So there's a lot of questions in terms of how we could work together. But I'm just going to lay out some potential opportunities. Because at the end of the day, it really does take a village to do this work. So some of the things, just doing the basic phenology, going out and plucking some of the reproductive shoots and collecting the data in whether it's Peaks Island, whether it's here, whether it's Shabig, Cliff, wherever there are meadows, to have people involved with just tracking the information. So it begins in early June and would go to sometime mid-September. And, 4 or 5 times, or every 4 or 5 days, just go out and at low tide. Now, it's not the kind of thing that we would just set you loose. We would do training and ideally identify a group of people to focus on a single meadow. But that's one aspect of just simply to understand the flowering period of that particular seagrass meadow. Then there's the seed collection and storage. So going into these donor meadows and collecting it. Now, generally that's a team of divers, but if people wanted to be involved in coming out and supporting on a given day, plucking the spathes, as it were, and then confirming again this timing of collecting. We're also continuing not just to do drone mapping, but we've developed an app to overlay all the maps that DEP has collected across all the islands. And you can literally go out with a sea kayak or a small skiff and just simply plug in GPS around the meadow, send that in, and there it is, a near real-time update of what that meadow's looking like. So that's yet another thing.
Using the app, so you have to manually...
We're building this right now. And that what you would do is you'd manually simply click the GPS points and then transfer the GPX data.
Okay, but it's not like you use your phone to track a run where you just hit go.
Not yet, hopefully, soon come. This is why in terms of funding opportunities, there's the Broadreach Community, or the Maine Community Foundation, there's the Broadreach Fund. There's a call for proposals that are specifically around eelgrass. And so there could be some ways to actually partner together on something like this. So this shows work that we did using this app off of East End Beach. And it shows a simple dashboard that people can access to get a sense of, what did it look like in '97? What did it look like in 2018? So that's coming. And this is with an amazing young computer science student at Bowdoin who's helping us with this app development, and we're in partnership with a group out of UMass Boston. So that's yet another opportunity. And then the actual collecting and then the processing of these seeds. Next year, we're going to target, I should have said when we did this first test last summer, we collected 50,000 seeds. This year, our target is 200,000. Next year, 1 million. Now that sounds like a lot, and it is. It's a lot of effort. But we think that's just scratching the surface. And that we're talking about 4,000 shoots, and there's an order of billions, hundreds of billions of these reproductive shoots out there. So the orders of magnitude are quite significant in terms of what's possible if we collect this plant material. Also, just simply public engagement, just getting people aware of it. This was in Freeport. This was out at the Freeport Town Hall. I don't know if you happen to drive by and see this big pink sculpture. That was all ghost gear that an amazing artist named Posey Moulton created. That's the image in back. And there's the image itself. And we embedded all this information about seagrass inside the sculpture. So it was a scavenger hunt. And there was this huge Girl Scout event. They were looking for something good to do on Earth Day. They chose this. And so we had thousands of Girl Scouts running around, but some who were just, because of that day, were like, hey, I want to be a marine scientist. And so it was extraordinary. And the other thing, within the Girl Scout training program, we were able to identify, they didn't have a sort of marine science core, but there was enough program aspects and opportunities that we were able to give back to them, if they were interested, a pathway to further develop their own learning and activity. We worked with Freeport Meeting House Arts, and we literally did a play, sort of like, imagine a 5th grade play of everyone in the audience, like you, would literally lift down under your seat, and you would see a story of an element inside of a seagrass meadow. It was the brittle star, a blue mussel, a green crab, and you had to become that animal. Not just learn about it, not just use, the right side of your brain, but you literally needed to embody it and become it. And it was absolutely amazing. And again, worked with Dwayne Toma, and this is Chief Hugh Akagi, Chief of the Passamaquoddy people on the Canadian side. And there's the great and honorable Libby Bischoff, who's the Executive Director of the Osher Map Library. It was just an extraordinary event. We shot it. We have it on YouTube. So if anyone wants to see it, we can make that available as well. But it was amazing. And we even had Johnny Carbon come out and sing a song about the Gulf of Maine is a ring of fire. So it was incredible. Does anyone know who this is? So remember Sea Grant director a few years back, Paul Anderson? That's Paul. So he's also a board member of Cobalt. But it was incredible. We actually had the Passamaquoddy names, the English names, and of course we had to then model the behavior, and at the end, everyone became a seagrass meadow. So there's Posey Moulton. There could be all sorts of interesting sculptures that could be done on different islands to raise awareness for seagrass, including using this material to create different headdresses. We're doing a computer, not just a simulation or even a gaming, but something that actually does real-time system seeing of these meadows. So as we're documenting them, we're going to be creating, this will be the first of its kind, a living atlas of these seagrass meadows as part of linking to good work in the wider bioregion. So think, Mount Washington, the Saco, the Androscoggin, the Presumpscot. Think about all the amazing elements that we're moving forward in terms of food, energy, water. No one person knows where all those things are happening. We're going to attempt to try to develop a one-stop shop to see where the green shoots of transformative change is happening at a bioregional scale. And we're going to begin with the seagrass meadows. Yes?
Some of the rhizomes, is it true that they can live for 1,000 years?
Could you say that?
The rhizomes, is it true that some of the eelgrass rhizomes can live over 1,000 years?
Well, I'll tell you, one of the largest known living organisms is a seagrass meadow off of Australia that has been living for thousands of years. And basically, they're clonally growing. So they actually have two forms of reproductive strategy. The asexual, which is the clonal expansion through the rhizomes. And then the sexual is the seed formation. So the sites that are completely clonal can be the same plant, just expanded over time. So yes, they can be very, very old.
Would they be the stronger of the species so that you would take
Well, it's interesting because here they are, we think they are, most of these meadows are clonal meadows that have enormous seed productivity. And so that's why capturing those seeds is actually an okay thing. It's not like it's going to hurt or damage the health of that meadow. So we think we've tapped into something that could work because of the nature of its reproduction.
And is the same process going on? And I assume that the manatee grass is similar or
Similar, yeah.
which they're having a great deal of problems
Yep.
in Florida. Are they going through the same process?
It doesn't quite have the same seed structure, and so there's less of an opportunity to do the seed-based restoration. The manatee grass, the haliduli, is done by transplanting. And here we're actually looking at both, and that's why as dredging occurs, going in and removing whole plants is actually okay. And there's been a lot of good work in doing both seed and whole plant transplanting.
And are your funds going to be able to be continued, or are they going to be?
I'm sorry?
Are your funds for this research?
We can only hope in this current climate. Yeah, in this current climate, it's extremely challenging. However, we do have some fairly good news for the next 2 years, but we're constantly trying to find more funding.
Is it Glenn?
Yes.
Maybe some of the people may know here, and you, I'm sure you do as well, but the Casco Bay Estuary Project has also funded Friends of Casco Bay to do similar research, and Friends of Casco Bay is doing this research on eelgrass with Manomet, which you mentioned, Glenn, and also with the Bigelow Lab. And each one of those research organizations is doing a piece of that project. Some are looking at sediment, some are looking at water quality, looking at the predators, etc. And Friends of Casco Bay has developed an app that you're talking about, similar, where people can take photos of eelgrass, and it's recorded as to where it is, and that goes back into our data bank, so we can monitor what's going on. And I'm sure you're aware of all.
Oh, absolutely. And what we're doing is taking that even further with the phenology work and actually going out and doing the aerial extent. So yes, and this is all critically important, but one where the Friends of Casco, and this was really important as we started this, the first person I went to was then the director, Kathy Ramsdell, and she said, there will never be a time that we send our members, our friends, into the water. So we said, aha, if we're to actually do this restoration work, we need to actually have a program that puts people in the water. So it's a wonderful relationship because we know sort of we need each other.
Yes, well, one of the Bigelow Labs is doing things in the water. And there's at least 40 different water recorders in Casco Bay that check on eelgrass.
Yeah.
And doing drone work as well as field.
That's right. But the one
Just
thing,
wanted to add
yeah.
so people know that there is other work that's going on as well.
But the one piece that no one's doing is the restoration work. That's the one super unique niche.
I'm sorry, that's not true. That's part of the whole project, and that's the next step.
Yeah, all I'm saying is the divers in the water that we're working on and doing the seed-based work. Okay, so here we are with sort of blending all these things together. And there's things like working with amazing artists. This is Hannah Day from Cliff Island. And so she did this beautiful, beautiful bit of original art of taking sort of the watershed with Mount Washington, showing some of the issues, Casco Bay, and you can see the seagrass meadows right there, but absolutely gorgeous original art inspired by this work. Also doing things like working with ceramics. This is an amazing potter in Boston who's connected with this and other programs. And this is an amazing guy up in Canada who's using seagrass to do super fine art. And this, of course, is an acorn basket, Ralph Sampson. So some really interesting applications of arts. And a lot of, as you were saying, there's a lot of groups doing a lot of different things. How do we work together and identify how we're adding value to each other, learning with and from each other, and finding where we can actually contribute? And so there's a whole lot of work and partners that we're working together. So it really requires a lot of coordination. And then finally, this idea of just simply informing policy. How do we inform policy around donor meadows? Currently, there is no policy of, well, when do you do it? How much can you take? What would be the regulatory authority? That doesn't exist. In the state of Maine, that doesn't yet exist. And so what we want to do is get ahead of that and help inform what would be a good policy directive for collecting of seeds. That's an excellent question, and I defer to the Harbor Commission for that. But what little I know about that is that there was a mitigation project that there was impacts to some seagrass meadows, and their mooring relocation project was as a result of that. So they were working with the Army Corps of Engineers, the authority under Section 404 of the Clean Water Act. But the further detail of that needs to be worked out with the Harbor Commission, because we were not involved in that. That was something we were aware of, paid attention to, and what we were interested in is when those moorings were being moved, what was the response? What was happening? Would they grow back? Was it not? And so we've looked at a few of them, and some of those, the scars that had occurred, did actually repopulate, but it has some potential for doing additional restoration. My sense is that that was a test, and that my sense is that timing, again, I'm not the expert to speak to this, but my sense is that that sort of followed a timing window. That is not necessarily policy that they're going to continue to require that into the future. But again, Harbor Commission would be the... Yeah, it's a great question. And I would say every place, in order to answer that question, we would really need to look at each place independently. Things like, is there a dragger fleet that's coming in on a regular basis? To what degree has warming been? What's been the development pressure? Is there green crab infestation? So there is no single smoking gun. And so what it takes is that sort of looking deeply at what might be those issues. And that's a key question, because as we begin to think about site suitability for restoration, we have to have a good answer for what might be those factors and how are we trying to reduce those pressures. There's a series of what might be called sort of bottlenecks to our understanding of how we do restoration. One of those is this issue of site selection because of the challenges as you just beautifully outlined. So, I defer to others as well, but from my understanding, there's a lot of anecdotal information that can be available. Number two, there was a huge die-off of eelgrass meadows in the 1930s from a slime mold called Labyrinthia. It's a long story, but basically it was almost a total die-off of seagrass meadows. So a lot of what we're seeing today is a response from this, and that slime mold is still present, but it hasn't gone into what might be a sort of pandemic equivalent to the seagrass meadows. It hasn't done that since the 1930s, and it's unclear what inspired that. So again, more complexity. But your questions are really good when it's probably only been since the late 80s that there's been an intensive, structured approach. In fact, it was in the Chesapeake, a guy named Bob Orth set up this idea of these flight lines, of having fixed-wing aircrafts do these flight lines, and the Chesapeake Bay was the first to have a sort of a good annual snapshot of the meadows. And so Maine followed up with that in the late 80s, early 90s, and is now, again, every 5 years coming back and doing that. So, and then there's satellite information, and then there's things like drone information. So we're getting better at being able to do what might be called remote sensing of these meadows. But it's not just about how are they doing, it's what do we then do if we want to expand it? And that's part of this whole story. Sometimes they will come off of the reproductive shoot, and occasionally you'll find seeds on the rack line. But it is different than the macroalgae, the seaweed that people are, the ascophyllum, the rockweed. It's a different organism. One's an algae, and the other is a flowering plant. Yeah, and this flowering plant just has enormous value. And again, this is by no means is this plant or is this ecosystem better than that one? We need them all. We need coastal forests, we need salt marshes, we need sand dunes, we need everything. We need it is a plurality, but it's interesting how there are a lot of organizations doing good work, but we're not making a huge dent yet and the applied restoration. And that's what we're really moving towards, is this, how do we actually start doing this at scale? So here, about 99% of the seagrass meadows are eelgrass, Zostra marina. There's a little bit of, every now and again, you might see what's called Rupia marittima, which is widgeon grass. So it's not to say that it's just eelgrass, but the vast majority of the seagrass meadows are composed of this one rather amazing species. It's around the world, and particularly around the northern latitudes, and there are different species of Zostra. But you will see Zostra marina, eelgrass, in places in Europe, in the Pacific Islands, et cetera, but more in a temperate area, not the tropical systems. There's other. No, actually, it's sort of in this colder water. Here we find the taller Zostra marina meadows, the eelgrass meadows. But you do see other species in the warmer waters, like the manatee grass, what's called turtle grass, so different species. But it's amazing. There's so many, this used to be an ecosystem, a seagrass ecosystem that covered the world, and it's perhaps one of the most fragile and critically important. When I was at COP, the Council of Parties for the UN Climate Program, there was a big COP26 in Edinburgh, Scotland, Glasgow, Scotland. And there was all these people, and sort of the tensions were high, but there was one place to go get lunch. This big, grand sort of cafeteria. And around all the walls was this sort of video of seagrass. Well, partially, I think they wanted to chill everybody out. But, and it's beautiful, it's stunning. These are stunning meadows, and they're very sort of melodic and gorgeous. But they're so important. And that's the other thing. They were just sort of reminding us. And there's a term of art these days that is used quite heavily, nature-based solutions. I'm not a huge fan of the term solution. I've become jaundiced in my idea of, can we solve this? But can we make pathways towards it? You bet. Does it require an enormous amount of people? Absolutely. Does it take, enormous number of groups looking at the science? Yes. Does it require artists, philosophers, musicians? You betcha. It's sort of like, and again, it's not just this ecosystem, it's anything related to life. But we have this enormous opportunity to reveal this. Also, there's a bit of the sacred in this ecosystem. There's so much power in this, and it's sort of hidden from sight. And we're beginning to work with those in the sort of not just formalized religions, but faith-based leaders around the importance of understanding and what does it mean as we continue to lose our natural ecosystems. What does it mean? Who are we? How do we show up? Yes, we try to restore. What does it mean as they continue to erode and lose around us? So these are profound questions and not clear answers, but these are the things we're working on. But just to say, this is an extraordinary system, and this really is so exciting, and it's really amazing. It really gets back to what you're doing with the land trust movement. And if there is a way for us to collaborate, it would be really wonderful, because it's so important to have both working in concert together. And then, of course, engaging with the media. This is Molly Enking from the local Maine NPR, and she came out. This is some others from the local newspaper and the local weather person. But Molly did a nice little story for NPR. She packaged it together, and what is sort of usual, they put their local package up for national distribution, and voila, here and now, NPR on January 1st of this year at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on the NPR radio stations around the country aired this story. That included Friends of Casco Bay, Casco Bay Estuary Partnership, Team Zoster, Cobalt, on this work that we're doing together. So with that, I just say thank you, and just remember the instructions for living a life. Pay attention, be astonished, tell about it. Mary Oliver. So, thank you.